Another week of the Striker Tejas podcast, your favorite USL Championship podcast with the best of the best covering our USL teams here in Texas. In San Antonio, my good friend Jonathan Check. How was your weekend, my friend?
My weekend was just peachy, I guess. Another SAFC game, another weekend of Jonathan doing Jonathan things. I don't even know what that entails, but yep.
Say hello to mom and dad. I can't say this enough. How much I like them and how much I love the passion that they have for soccer and everything that they do for San Antonio FC and for the Carketeers and all of that. So very cool.
I think you kind of just did say hi to them. I mean, they are going to be
Oh
listening to
yeah,
this. I hope.
that's true. That's true. That's true. They're with us every week. Like a lot of the people down there in San Antonio, which is very cool, amazing year. We can't say that enough, also. But we're going to talk a little bit more about San Antonio game this past weekend and this coming weekend. Uh, let's go down south. I-35 to McAllen, the Houston hats now. He changes the hats. It's a baseball season now. Is that it, Edson?
That's right.
I gotta tell you, man, I like when you use more the Mexican teams and all of those things more than the baseball. But I'll accept this one, especially after the amazing post that you did after the game, where you were just a little bit mad on whatever happened. And I usually say don't mix emotions with social media, but you were able to do those two together, which was great. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes also.
I promise you, I'm calmer now than I was right after the game.
Oh man,
I
I
should
wish
hope
you were
so.
not. I wish you were calm then and mad now. The podcast would have been great if you were in that mood. But anyways, we go all the way to the west of the state with our friend that doesn't love too much Windows updates. My friend Joe Rodriguez. How are you, Joe?
I'm just glad you all can hear me. My voice has listeners this evening. Jonathan, Edson, Roberto, it's good to be back for another week of talking USL Championship. And what will probably sound like another week of me trying to come up with answers slash excuses slash not trying to throw the team that I cover too much under the bus. That
Well, at
is
least at that
El
point, you're
Paso
better than
Locomotive
Wilmer
FC.
Cabrera.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure to be back. Another tough week for El Paso Locomotive FC. We'll talk plenty about that and about the tough road that still remains here in the final stretch of the season for the team from the borderland.
Yeah, so just a quick summary of the weekend. San Antonio and RGV tied 2-2. We're going to talk about that game. El Paso lost at home for San Diego, which we always knew was going to be a tough game. No matter what, we're going to talk about that. With those results, we finished this round this week of USL Championship. San Antonio once again sitting at first, not just in the Western Conference, but in the whole league. In a pretty much comfortable position at this point in the league. 57 points, 25 games played. El Paso is sitting seventh, right above the playoff cut line with 34 points, 27 games. Although in lost points, in a way, you would be outside the playoff zone, which it's a dangerous situation. And then RGV, who's sitting last at the Western Conference with 13 points, 13th position, 27 points, 24 games. If RGV was on the Eastern Conference, they would be sitting, if I'm not mistaken, on eighth, battling to be on playoff position, which is crazy how unbalanced this year the Eastern Conference and the West Conference is. But let's start with let's leave the Copa Tejas game last for this one, and let's start with Joe. Very tough game for El Paso this past weekend. But again, I think we talked about last week how difficult this game was going to be, and almost that we couldn't. Can let me change this. Can we take conclusions out of this game either way? If they had win or lost, would be a good game for us to take any specific conclusions about this team.
You know what, Roberto? I've thought about it all week and the early part of this week, and honestly, just coming to conclusion that I'm sorry. Any way you cut it, it is officially panic time for El Paso Locomotive to make the playoffs. And that's just the way it is. I know a lot of people won't like to hear that. A lot of people will like to still point out that El Paso Locomotive's destiny is still in their own hands. But once again, if you take the body of work that has been the regular season, if you take the body of work that has been this last 6 games, I'm sorry, the most loyal El Paso Locomotive fans cannot feel comfortable, confident about what these final 7 games for El Paso Locomotive might bring. Saturday night against San Diego Loyal, those 3 goals that were scored that the Locos conceded, God, they just looked they looked terrible in those 3 moments. Those were probably the 3 easiest goals that they have conceded, or it looked like that the opposition was able to score on them. And it just, those 3 moments, they looked really, really bad. They played toe to toe. They had their moments that they were better than San Diego. And to be honest with you, San Diego, they didn't look like a team that is just an amazing team that is in, currently in the position of the ladder that they find themselves in. They just were not. They didn't look that way. They didn't look that way over the course of 90 minutes. And they still got the win, 3-1 over El Paso Locomotive. I don't think, if I have to compare them to the team that's ahead of them, which is San Antonio, I think San Antonio, even when they might not score a lot of goals or have a thoroughly dominating performance that's very evident even to the most casual soccer fan, I think San Antonio performs with one hand on their waist relatively easy. I don't think that was necessarily the case for San Diego. They didn't look a whole lot special, but yet it was enough to dominate and to get the 3 points on the road against El Paso Locomotive, which frankly, playing the Locos at home doesn't scare a whole lot of people right now, to be honest with you. And if you look at the recent body of work, in the last 6 games, they've only been managed to come up with a 4-4 draw against Colorado. That's 18 points that out of 18 points, they've only been able to obtain 1. If they were able to obtain half of those points, half of those 18 points, that would be good enough for, I believe, 3rd place in this conference. So it shows you a lot. And the things aren't getting easier, guys, for El Paso Locomotive. I'll just end up with this. They still have road games to go. They still have to go and play their biggest rival, New Mexico United, Labor Day weekend up in Albuquerque. They still have to go play the Tampa Bay Rowdies, which, oh yeah, they are in 3rd place in the Eastern Conference.
I was gonna say that, Joe. I was gonna say the good news is that out of the 7 last games, only 2 against California teams, but the other 5 are very tough games also.
Right.
So
Yeah, no, absolutely. You got an Orange County game. You have a Colorado Springs Switchback game, that's the team that they had to play 3 times this year. I think everybody in the league had to play that once because of the number of teams in the league. It's Colorado, I believe, for El Paso Locomotive. No, it's a home game. I'm sorry, but still, it's a tough road ahead. And the Locos guys, they have not beat a top 5 team in either conference all season long. There's a lot to be worried about here in the final stretch for El Paso Locomotive, their fans, and their front office.
Being a big fan of the organization overall, I'm sure it's a tough moment, especially with the change of a head coach, how he went on the off season, how this all went, and in the history, right? I think when you compare the El Paso of today with the El Paso of the last couple of years, that's what maybe makes it even harder, the whole process. But anyways, let's go fly to San Antonio at this point to talk a little bit about that Copa Tejas game. And I'm going to start with you, Jonathan, just because I want to explore the emotions that Edson had after the game. After you talk about, did this tie feel like a loss to you guys or to San Antonio, or did the other way around? If you look how emotional and how upset Edson was, it's almost like he had RGV had the win on their hands and gave up to San Antonio. How did you see the game, and how did Marcina see the game on Saturday?
I mean, first of all, hindsight is 2020. If you tell RGV, "Hey, you're going to go up to San Antonio," the team leading the league in points and in control of sort of the overall first place in the league, if you say you're going to get a point from there, then maybe that's not the worst thing. But given that they gave up that 2-0 lead in the first half that they got, which SAFC was reflecting at the end of the match, saying, we were very flat. We didn't represent our team identity, and this is at least the second time in the last few weeks that they've said that they know they haven't quite been themselves. So maybe a bit concerning that they keep having that issue where they're not necessarily showing up, where they're not playing as well as they know they should be able to, that they've shown they're able to. So that's perhaps a bit concerning. SAFC, okay, sure, happy to get the point, but I think there was a little more frustration both with going down and just not being able to be as good of a team as they have been. And
so more like more like a self frustration than anything else. Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah. And
Yeah.
I know after the match, Mitchell Tanner, one of the leaders on the team, was saying he wanted everyone to sort of go home over the next few days until they, reconvene for practice on Tuesday. He wanted them to go and look in the mirror and ask, what do they need to do better? How can they be better? Because he said he didn't think anyone on the field played their best that night, and it certainly didn't show in the first half.
Yeah, and then he took it out on Cello, throwing him into the ad board. But that's all I'm gonna say.
Oh, say it a little bit more.
Well, I don't know. It's just I know that San Antonio looked very frustrated. The players, I mean, to me, and I mentioned it the day after the game. To me, it felt like Wilmer Cabrera kind of ate Alan Morcina tactically for lunch. RGV had that advantage out on the wings with Akeem O'Connor Ward and Ricky Ruiz. And that's where I felt like they were having most of their danger. The first goal coming in off of a corner kick, and then the second goal off of Akeem O'Connor Ward. Was his intention to shoot? Was his intention to pass? Doesn't matter. The ball went into the net, caught Jordan Farr off guard. But and then to me, like right at the end of that first half, after that second goal was scored, San Antonio looked lost. San Antonio looked desperate. San Antonio looked confused. They spent most of their energy complaining against the ref, creating a bunch of fouls, rather than actually getting themselves, the mentality to how can we get past this pressure by RGVFC. And the second half, I felt to me started a little bit better still for RGVFC. Yeah, I mean, they found a third opportunity that was, to me, erroneously called offside. And that play right there, the fact that they called that 3-0 offside, I felt like that gave momentum and a boost of confidence to San Antonio. Right after, that's where San Antonio gets the 2-1. And I still can't, and I know I mentioned it after the match, and I'm sure Roberto's gonna tease me about it. But to me, I still think that Wilmer Cabrera really messed up making those substitutions right as Mohamed Abu was going to execute that last minute free kick.
We're not hearing you, Roberto. I think you're trying to talk and we do not hear.
Sorry, guys. Sorry. If you go to Edson's social media accounts, you're going to be able to see that video. He was very upset with the fact that you don't make a substitution when you have a set piece in place against you, right?
So there's two mistakes, right? The fact that he made those substitutions when you're defending a free kick, number one. Number two is the fact that you put your tallest player when you know that San Antonio more often than not did not go for a direct shot on their free kicks outside the ball. They always went for a cross towards your towers like Mitchell Tainter or Kamiri, and you put your tallest player that you're bringing in, Frank Darcy, you put him on the wall. And you put one of your shortest players, Luka Malisevich, in charge of Mitchell Tainter. Like, how did he think that that was going to be favorable for
But but,
RGVFC?
that, but let's also think: is that his fault or was the player's fault also? Right? Sometimes it's the players that end up making that decision on the field, and so I'm gonna not crucify Cabrera today on this one because I know again players make decisions when they're in the field, and maybe it might not be all on him, and maybe we can focus a little bit more on what you said at the beginning. He ate Marcina alive on the first half, and also brought a point home against the best team in the league. So it's I know it hurts, but
And
again,
I mentioned it the day after, like I mentioned, I said the positive things, where I talked about the fact that this was to me the best 45 minutes I have seen out of RGVFC. As far as their performance, they really exceeded my expectations of that match. They look very stout defensively. That's not something that should be a surprise. And offensively, I like the fact that players like Christian Pinzon and Akim O'Connor Ward had the motivation, had the confidence in themselves to try to look for shots from outside the box. Which I felt that for a lot of these games, it was lacking for them, or at least a definitive, dangerous shots from outside the box. And when you've got tactically uh, the option, or you rely too much on your crossing when you're going up against a team like San Antonio, like I mentioned, with really tall defenders. That's not going to be an option because your attackers really aren't that tall to even compete with them. So what do you got to do? You got to try and go more through the middle, try to get those long shots from outside the box, or try to look for that 1-2 pass to try to maneuver yourself past those defenders. And I think that's what eventually that paid dividends for RGV. So I think Wilmer in that aspect really did a good job in analyzing San Antonio, how they've been playing, analyzing the weaknesses that were exposed in their last couple of games, and try to make most of his squad to put yourself in a positive position for maybe 50-60 minutes.
cool. Yeah. So again, I think was if we look back on this game, I think was a good game overall, right? For a Copa Tejas, rivalry. It's one more that brings some history to it. Uh, like Jonathan said before, I think if on Wednesday last week when we were recording the podcast, we would have said, and maybe we did say, do you want to take a tie this weekend and not play San Antonio? Most likely RGV would have take that tie and not even go to play that game, right? So maybe it is good. All right, let's talk about the next three games. I think this weekend is a very interesting weekend for the Texas teams, and I'm going to start with I believe it's the easiest game of all of the three. San Antonio is flying to Indy to play Indy on Saturday, kickoff 6 p.m. Central Time. All the games, as everybody knows, at this point of the season on ESPN Plus. You can watch those games live there. But playing Indy, who's at this point sitting ninth with 22 points in 24 games, like we said, RGV is sitting 13th on the Western Conference, 27 points, right? So 5 points more, the same amount of games, and it's sitting last. So technically, a weaker side of USL Championship on the eastern side, especially on the bottom half. Uh, Not just that, Indy is coming from a 4-game loss streak, right? So momentum is not there at all. Should we be concerned about this game, Jonathan, or those 2 days that people went home, looked at the mirror, can I do better? Can this team, come back from a bad result at home against RGV?
So I talked to Alan Marcina and Mohamed Abu at practice yesterday on Tuesday, and Abu was talking about how, yeah, he feels like they showed up, looked like maybe they're in a better frame of mind, and that sometimes you need results like that to kind of wake you up, to make you realize, okay, sometimes we really are going to need to fight. We can't come out flat like we did. Um, but it's one thing to say that, and it's another thing to actually do it. And going up to Indy, I mean, I feel like you're kind of framing Indy as, oh, it's this team that's been struggling a lot lately, that's not doing well. You would have said the same thing about RGV last week, and look how that turned out. I mean, you cannot take any of these teams lightly. And uh, something Mitchell Tainer says is, we respect all but fear none. Alan Marcina always says there are no easy teams in the league, and matches like this past weekend's proved it. So you maybe have that extra fire under you this week going into that match, where you know you need to bounce back, you need to prove that you are one of the best teams, but it's a lot easier said than done.
I mean,
And I think it's also just interesting to consider this is a struggling team, but also coached by Mark Lowry, who over his 3 years with El Paso typically did well against SAFC. I mean, Alan Marcina maybe figured him out toward the end, but overall, Lowry seemed to have his strategy figured out to oust Marcina.
one of the things, though, that's going to be, I think, the key to this game is what kind of mindset Indy 11 comes into this game, because they're, what, 17 points out of the playoff zone? They still have 10 games left in the season. But, I mean, have they packed it up for the year? Have they packed it in for the year? Is there still a sense of belief in this team? Is Lowry going to try different players going into this game to see what they have against a quality opponent like San Antonio? I think that's going to be key too.
It's hard for somebody to throw the ball tower 10 rounds before the end of the championship, but it is basically, you start thinking about next year already also, right? And I think that's something that coaches can use also with the squad, is saying, hey, most of these players in the USL Championship don't have contract for next year usually, right? It has changed a little bit, but a lot of them don't. So they're going to be using most likely this end of the season to say, hey, you got to prove yourself to stay here next year, or you're going to be finding another place to go. All right. Next game, I was trying to figure out which one is the most difficult game between the two, but it is very hard. So I'm going to go with the question mark here more than anything, right? No, El Paso is hosting Phoenix Rising, and for us to say that Phoenix Rising might not be the most difficult game, it even sounds harsh on our ears that have followed Phoenix for the last almost decade or whatever. But it's such an interesting team this year with ups and downs. They have one tied and lost one of the three last games, right? Over the last 3 games, one tie, one loss. But they beat Colorado, which is the hardest team of all of the streak that they had. They tied Vegas, and they lost to Orange County, who was sitting last in the conference, right? So a very unknown team to play against. That game on Saturday, 9 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Mountain Time. Phoenix is sitting 10th, 29 points, 24 games. Should we guarantee that El Paso should have this 3 points?
Oh, no, God, no. No, this game is a big motivation for Phoenix, I think, coming in. Obviously, you have a team like El Paso that's sitting in the final position of the playoffs. You're only 5 points. You're only 5 points. Excuse me. You're 5 points behind them. You have 3 games in hand on them. I mean, this is a rally cry. I think if we talk about how RGV last year just made a run to get into the playoffs at this last time. I mean, if anybody is lining themselves for that kind of potential run, it might be Phoenix, and then they just got a new head coach, so that automatically injects um, motivation for the new team under a new technical director, head coach, whatever phrase you use. So I mean, this is a tough game, and I mean for El Paso, they have all of the doubts I think are piling up in their capacity. It wouldn't surprise me in the least bit that these last six performances, it's getting in their head, it's in between their ears. Their confidence might be a little bit shot. Not to mention being at home this Saturday just might not carry the same kind of weight that it usually does because of the fact that there's a college football game season opener that's already going to be a sellout. So over 45,000 sports fans will be at the Sun Bowl cheering on the UTEP Miners. So that's going to detract a lot of people from going to Southwest University Park on Saturday night.
So even less pressure on the visiting team.
It's going to be less pressure on the visiting team. So it's just this situation is stacking itself up to be another difficult game for El Paso Locomotive, just like the rest of the remaining six games after that. It's a
all
tough
finals.
road
It's
for El
all
Paso.
finals for El Paso moving forward now.
Absolutely. So you have 7 games. You have 21 points. I'm sorry. I think El Paso is going to have to obtain over 15 of those 21 points if they want to make the playoffs.
Yeah. So RGV is going to fly to Vegas, play some slot machines, some blackjack there. Kickoff at 9:30 p.m. Central Time. Also Saturday. Interesting thing about Las Vegas. Las Vegas is sitting 6 with 37 points in 26 games. So I'm going to ask you, Edson, if you see our friend Wilmer Cabrera that doesn't believe in games of 6 points, can you tell them that this is a game of 6 points? It's 3 points for RGV and 3 points for El Paso, because a win it really is going to help El Paso on their run for the playoff position.
Well, he did mention last week that each of these games is going to be like a final for his team. So I don't know which one you think is better, the 6 points or the fact that in this situation.
The whole term of we have an X amount of finals left this season, that's cliche. 6-point games are mathematical fact. So I mean, that's just the way I see it.
Yeah,
Sure,
but
we should change the name of this podcast to "We Love Wilmer." I think that should be our name. But anyways, can RGV come back from Vegas with a jackpot from that game?
I definitely think it's possible. Right now, Las Vegas Lights aren't carrying their best momentum. I think in the last 5 games, they've only scored. Yeah, they've only scored 2 goals in those 5 games. So I definitely think right now that it is very doable for RGV to be able to get a positive result. I think, despite my initial reactions, I think the positives of the fact that RGV seem to be better at finishing uh, in this past game. If they continue that mark and continue a defensive stability, but keep it for the 90 plus minutes, I definitely do think that RGV can actually stun Las Vegas at their home and be able to actually beat the house.
All right. Busy weekend for our Texas teams on USL Championship. Let's go for our favorite moment of the week. At least it is my favorite moment of the week. Making me look dumb to everybody that's watching or listening to us, because we never get it right anyways. So last week, the Texas teams got 2 points total on those 2 games, which was the tie from RGV and San Antonio. I had a 4 points weekend. Jonathan had a 3 points. Edson had 3 points. So you guys got close there. and Joe had a 5 point. So I'm ready here to give mine. So again, 3 games: San Antonio away with Indy, El Paso home with Phoenix, and RGV away with Las Vegas. I'm going with 5 points, guys. I'm going with a
Okay.
win and 2 ties. Good weekend. I would say it would be a good weekend if we hit those 5 points, uh, uh, especially depending on who gets those 3 points. But anyways, I'll go with 5. Joe, what is your bet for this week? 2 points. You're muted, but we
Yeah.
can see your
Dose,
fingers here. Two
dose,
points.
dose, deuce, 2. That's what I
All
bet.
right. I'm not gonna even ask where you're gonna get those 2 points. I'm gonna spare you from that. Edson, what is your bet?
I'm actually going to be positive. I'm going to say 6.
6 points. All right. So somebody's gonna lose this weekend. I'm not gonna ask you who you think is gonna lose either. I'm gonna let you go. All right, Jonathan.
I'll go with 4. Win,
4.
draw, loss.
All right. So, man, chances that we get something right here are big because we're everywhere here. Today, there's no repeated one. So, if you're listening to this, Harry, post us, man. Post. What do you think we're gonna get? Texas this or whoever else is listening to our podcast today. Make sure to repost our podcast. We appreciate your support on making more people listening to us. Again, we can only do this if you subscribe, if you follow us on social media. I think the Striker has done a great work with great, amazing journalists and people that are passionate about the sport and passionate about supporting local soccer. So, as always, I'm going to go away with saying support local soccer. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.